This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Guys, I'm gonna be real. After months of kind of being soaked in it, whether intentionally or not, the drama-related content is really not what I want to get into for a while. I mean, there's just so much hate, contempt, and annoying fans to deal with at every corner. Sometimes we all just gotta step back and understand the more you feed into something, the more likely it can consume you. It's gotten me so tuckered out over the past few months, so I want to step away and talk about something not nearly as toxic, some good old reviews. And to start that off, I'm gonna talk about something heavily requested these past few months that I know will have no negative backlash: My Hero Academia. Yes, I know, no one has really talked about obscure old MHA, but there's quite a lot I want to say about it, so I hope you'll humor me as I go into the depths. I've got a really good feeling about how this will go, so buckle up as we talk about My Hero Academia. Well, that went about as well as I expected it to. My Hero Academia, or Boku no Hero Academia for all you true intellectuals, assholes, is a property that I have a sort of connection to. For anyone out of the know, MHA is an anime and manga series written by Kohei Horikoshi and animated by Studio Bones about a world where superheroes are an everyday commodity. About 80% of the population has a power, or as it's called in this world, a quirk. It could range from body mutations to power-up abilities, or you could just be invisible, which, when it's an ability that you can't turn off, sounds like the stuff of true nightmares. Anyway, as society grew to have a higher percentage of quirk users, laws were created, organizations were made, and schools for regulating those quirks emerged. And those with truly exceptional ones could then go on to use them at hero agencies and truly become My Hero Academia. The story follows Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless kid that's always wanted to be a hero, watching them from afar and taking notes, when suddenly it appears he can become one after being scouted by the one person he admires above everyone else, All Might, the #1 hero. Unfortunately, All Might was wounded 5 years ago and can now only become buff for a few hours before becoming whatever the hell this thing is, so he gives Midoriya One for All, his super powerful quirk that allows him to pass it on to others to become the next symbol of peace. With that, Izuku tries to control these powers while making friends at the top hero school, UA, and fending off their main enemy, the League of Villains. For your average observer of anime, or even a passing anime fan, that sounds like a pretty basic description for a shonen action series, and that's true. At its core, it's a pretty basic, some might even say generic concept, but it's best to remember that any concept can be done well if it has the right execution. The Emoji Movie wasn't terrible because of concept alone, it was about the people working on it. I mean, does a movie about Lego figures or a story about cloves being alive really sound like something that could amount to anything on its own? No, it's who makes it. Any concept can sound dumb if you word it right, but if you have competent people who have a vision behind it, anything can be worthwhile, and My Hero Academia sure captivated an audience. It seems like every year nowadays there's always at least one anime that gets imported over here, which Western audiences of all kinds go for, and that's usually thanks to attractiveness towards certain groups. One Punch Man brought in Kick-Ass and Deadpool fans, Attack on Titan got the Game of Thrones audience, Demon Slayer caught traction in the West off its pure hype from Japan, Tokyo Ghoul got Tumblrites. And in a year like 2016, when superhero movies were at an all-time high in hype, we got some big hits like Deadpool and Civil War, but we also got some duds like Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad. So it would only make sense the public would go anywhere for the chance of getting some good old sky-high action, and MHA was there to fill that niche. So if it could get so big in the West, you can only imagine how big it got among anime fans. People stand the shit out of My Hero Academia, and by the end of the second season, it hit an all-time high in popularity, and then it hit a much higher high by the end of its third, and needless to say, it's still a giant in the anime industry while people are still waiting for season 5. And with such a big following comes a just as large, highly vocal fan base, and like any normal person, it's something I fear beyond belief. It's a fan base I know quite well from being a big fan of the show back when it first released, so let a veteran say this is gonna be some dangerous shit. I expected backlash on my Demon Slayer video, and I've gotten dislike bombed before as well, but this could be on a completely different level if I don't tread a fine line. If I go too far out in one direction, the firing squad will be ready, the stands will raid my office, and they'll probably indict me on war crimes, but I'm still gonna try to not hold back anything. So for real this time, let's talk about My Hero Academia, and heavy spoilers for the anime are inbound for anyone who cares. But before that, have you ever wondered if people are looking at you when you go on the internet? Well, the truth is, there are, and they've been doing it your entire lives. They're called your internet service provider, and they're constantly looking at your information to give you targeted ads by selling it to other companies. Now, you're watching an anime YouTube video, you're a man of culture, so you probably want a quality VPN to take back your internet privacy, and there's no better than Surfshark VPN. Not only is it fast and affordable for keeping your internet privacy, but it also allows you to put it on multiple devices, while other VPN services will limit it to a few, when you can have it on unlimited devices. You're basically a god. Not only that, but with a VPN, you can look at area-restricted content from different countries. You want to look at The Office UK, but you can't see all of that on the US Netflix? Well, boom, you got that now. What are you, some kind of magical fairy man? Well, I'm gonna be the first one to tell you right now, sweetheart, it's all incredibly real, and you can use my affiliate link JustStop to get 83% off a purchase of a subscription, and you'll get 3 months of free usage. Now that's a deal. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring, and back to the video. The main thing I want to discuss about the show over everything else for the majority of this video is the characters, specifically our main lead, supporting cast, and huge tertiary support, because My Hero Academia is very much character-driven above everything else, when the League of Villains isn't bursting into every event the school does, except for that one time they didn't. Starting with the lead Izuku Midoriya, or Deku as his hero name goes. No! Don't play the Ocarina of Time music here. Nintendo's an evil bastard, and if you were planning on making a joke relating to Deku Nuts and Zelda, please don't do that, man, please. But yeah, Izuku, he's a main character, I guess. At first, I thought it was quite interesting how he was this sort of underdog among a world of people who could crush him by blinking, and it would be interesting to see how he answered the question of, can a person be a hero without a super powerful quirk? And he was able to find that answer, which is yes. Yes, you do. I didn't think about this when I watched it as a naive 12-year-old, but doesn't it seem kind of weird how Izuku poses this great question that could be explored upon by him as a quirkless kid, and it's almost immediately dashed when Izuku is given the power? Like, in episode 1, Izuku gets told to kill himself by his best friend with exploding powers. He's pretty down, and after All Might saves Izuku from a slime monster, he poses the question to All Might, and he says, nah, you should work at the police or some shit. Then the same slime monster gets out and gets a hold of Explodey Kid Bakugo. This is supposed to be the inciting incident where we see Izuku's character in action and the story really gets kicking. With All Might out of power and heroes in the area not being able to get close, Izuku is the only person to try to just rush in and save Bakugo. This moment is supposed to cement why Izuku is supposed to be the main character and worthy of the power, etc. The logic is that all good heroes had their legs just start moving to stop a crisis, but what Izuku did wasn't really hero-like at all. The reason the other heroes were staying back was to not have anyone die, and Izuku just kind of jeopardized the mission by rushing in without a plan and only really making the situation worse by him being there. It would have been cool if maybe he used all of his knowledge over the years to, without a quirk, still take down the villain or even just make the situation better, but all he did was throw his book bag at the monster and start scraping. Great job, Izuku. No one would have thought of that otherwise. Thinking logically, if Izuku could have actually defeated the slime monster on his own without a quirk but instead using ingenuity and wit he had accumulated over a long period of time, wouldn't that have been a much better incentive for All Might to give Izuku the quirk of One for All, because he's shown that he could be a hero without a quirk, and therefore if he had the quirk, who knows what he could do? But nah, he just sort of charged at him because he wanted to save Bakugan. If he had no way to help at all, he wasn't being heroic, he was just being dumb. This was a huge missed opportunity to show that Izuku could still handle himself in a tough situation through his countless hours of fanboying as foreshadowed and shown in the beginning, but no, he's just a dumbass. The only reason Bakugo and Izuku didn't die then and there was because All Might saved them, and on a small side note there, it was also a bit of a bad first impression for All Might because after he lost the slime monster he was thinking, oh god, I'm barely even a hero, what could I even do to help? And like, dude, you've been a professional hero for how long now? You're telling me you've never lost a perp before? I don't know, that just sort of annoyed me. Anyway, yeah, I found it a quite weak foundation to base a character around, but thankfully Izuku's entire character theme of self-sacrifice does have some good moments afterwards, such as, I don't know, 3 episodes later where self-sacrifice is much better exemplified when Izuku harms himself to face a challenging enemy for someone else that he actually had a chance of and ended up defeating. In the sports festival, he repeatedly breaks his hand, leading to permanent damage and tons of pain, all to help Todoroki realize his true self. In the training camp arc, he fights Muscular for Koda's sake and wins despite the likelihood he'd lose and being basically out of commission the entire arc. The first impression is still really important to the story though, and the fact All Might chooses Izuku to hold his power because of this event feels unearned and completely missing an opportunity to see Izuku develop without a quirk at all and still be able to succeed despite that. Besides that, Izuku is just an alright main character. The aspect of handling One for All and getting used to the power while making it his own was somewhat interesting. It's also nice to see him never really stop improving on the ability and upgrading any way he can. Plus, that leads to more costumes and therefore more merchandise to sell. I also enjoyed seeing him become more confident and stand up to Bakugo, but he was pretty much able to do that like 6 episodes in, so him continuing to do that multiple times over the next several dozen does kind of have a slightly gradually lessening effect on me, but other than that, I don't have much to say. Izuku's main flaw is just being an okay protagonist surrounded by people infinitely more interesting than him, especially in his class. Well, at least half of them are more interesting than him, because if I'm being honest here, I barely know the other half. I generally know what their abilities are, and they've interacted a little bit with the main cast as classmates, but they never really get that much time to shine, so they start to truly feel like background ornaments. That's just a problem with a show introduction like My Hero Academia, where all the characters had and still do have the potential to be interesting and likable, but we get introduced to a few too many at one time considering the way MHA likes to go about storytelling. Let me explain this by comparing it to a show I love quite dearly with a problem that's similar but not as bad, Assassination Classroom. The basic idea of this show is that 28 students put in a classroom for failures are tasked with killing their teacher, a man-made tentacle monster that created a hole in the moon and plans to do the same thing to Earth if he isn't killed by the end of the school year. This show actually has more members in their class than 1A by 8 students, yet I feel like I know them much better thanks to the type of series the mangaka went for. While Assassination Classroom has arcs and branching character motivations that can be seen across episodes, the show is generally a comedy and much more episodic than MHA, usually having 2 or so segments an episode. With a faster pace and in the beginning most often having a segment focused on one student in particular, we get a small glimpse into their personalities and interests, lives outside school, and how they interact with the rest of the class. Then, after the story picks up more and the class acts more as a group instead of seeing stories based around one person, we still get to see how they each might individually react to the situation based on their personalities, and that aspect of learning more about them during downtime never fades as the show always makes room for lounge time. Having too many characters is still an issue for Assassination Classroom, as some characters obviously get more attention than others, but with the style of the show, I think it works much better than MHA, as the execution really helped. Now, am I saying MHA is badly executed? No, not by any means. The pacing of arcs and the story are quite good, and are able to keep a person entertained throughout the viewing experience, but MHA has always been a much more linear series. What I mean by this is so that Horikoshi can have a little bit more of a cohesive narrative, he'll either focus on a large group and have each member of that specific group have small moments, or he'll focus an entire arc around only a few characters and give them some big moments. Focusing on the bigger group side, parts of the sports festival arc, final exam arc, and to an extent the provisional license exam arc all have this sort of method. And this kind of style, along with its flaws, could be seen near the beginning during the brief battle trial arc, where each student is paired up with another in a team and faces the other as heroes and villains. Even with this method of larger groups with smaller moments, the majority of the arc is focused on Bakugo and Tenya Ida versus Izuku and Ochako Uraraka, having 2 of the 3 episodes solely focused on them, more specifically just Izuku and Bakugo, while Ida and Uraraka fiddle away in the background. The last episode is dedicated to showing all the other students' teams in action, but we barely see them do anything. They appear for a few seconds to maybe do one thing, cut to the next team, do a thing, cut to the next team. We barely learn anything about their personalities at all because we see them for such a short time. In terms of students, the first instance of us knowing any of their personalities other than the 4 mentioned above was in the USJ arc, where we learned more about how Mineta and Tsuyu acted. After this segment, I had a whole list about the main focuses of each arc to sort of show a connection, but that'd be boring, so I'll just say that overall, the main characters to get development besides Ida, Izuku, Bakugo, and Uraraka were Kirishima, Mineta, Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki. This is because time was usually set aside for them above others to develop and have moments in the story that mattered, and while all these characters are well developed for the most part, with how much is given to them above others in these arcs which are supposed to be about smaller groups and showing their small moments, it doesn't leave nearly as much room for them to be seen by the viewer. Does this mean the whole cast can't still be likable or have good moments? Absolutely not, but many characters with potential still end up being uninteresting or underdeveloped in the long run. To show that, I'll go through every character and tell you about them. We already know Izuku, a bright, geeky anime protagonist that gets shy a lot but can step up to the plate when he needs to. He cares about his friends and nerds out a lot. Tenya Ida, a strict rule follower and caring person. He's heavily invested in school and hero work thanks to being inspired by his rich family of other well-known heroes. shows. Thanks to this devotion, however, he can sometimes overthink a situation and be too trusting when it's with someone he's been taught to admire. Though he's a fair sport about most things, he's unafraid to get competitive and emotional when the time comes, and when something he treasures for his morals, such as his brother, is harmed, it can be difficult to reason with him because he's gotten into his head that this is what has to be done for the better, even if it really only benefits him in the moment. Katsuki Bakugo. From a young age, he was told the quirk he had was amazing, leading to a superiority complex where he believed everyone else was below him, making him resent Izuku for still trying to help him out despite that. Izuku admires Bakugo in a way that makes him enraged because using that admiration, he's able to surpass Bakugo in many areas, on occasion with his own movesets. This hatred is something that motivates him to continually get stronger and improve. Also, despite his aggressive outward appearance, he deeply cares about impressing and surpassing All Might, and he holds an underlying respect for people like Uraraka that were ready to fight him at full power, along with trust towards those that have helped him in the past, such as Kirishima and Kaminari. He's reckless at first glance when fighting, but he actually has great choreography and knows just what he wants to do in battling, contributing to Izuku's admiration. It's also an interesting dynamic of seeing the two slowly grow closer through fights between one another. Shoto Todoroki. Born to surpass All Might with his intentionally created quirk, he has emotional scarring from constantly having to train with his father, the number 2 hero Endeavor. His only solace was a want to become a hero spurred on by his mother, who ended up scalding him with hot water for the side that resembled his father. For the longest time, he tried to go without using his father's side of his quirk, Fire and Ice, but with the help of Izuku and others, he's able to realize his quirk is his, and he's more than just his father. He doesn't show deep emotions too much, instead letting his actions speak for themselves, and in the process is able to keep a cool head. Ichiro Kirishima. He's all about honor, chivalry, and being a true man's man in any situation. He's bold, decisive, and is, no pun intended, a rock for helping motivate others. I'd say he's one of my favorite characters, but I'm not sure he can compare to Class 1B's Tetsu. He's bold, decisive, and is a metal rock for helping motivate others. Momo Yaoyorozu. Always considered one of the most common rational thinkers in Class 1A, she started out just being the analytical type with nerves of steel, but the sports festival arc and others opened up the door to see her insecurities about quick decision making, and it was nice to see her develop with the help of Todoroki to become a more bubbly, enthusiastic rich girl. Minoru Mineta. Okay, listen, I know there's some hate from my boy Mineta, and you know what? Fuck all of you, I like him. You know why? He's the most goddamn relatable out of anyone in Class 1A besides Uraraka. What's more human than just wanting to be a hero to get girls? I know tons of people that'd be just like that, and Mineta is serious about his goal. Oh, but he's a pervert. Yeah, and let me tell you a little secret. Douchebags and perverts are at their best in the series when they constantly get their comeuppance, and that's exactly what happens to Mineta when he starts perving. You gotta kinda admire how the guy is willing to put himself through so much just for his ambitions. Not only that, but Mineta is willing to overcome his fears in multiple instances to help out or even win a battle. In the USJ arc, he plays a critical role in getting away from the villains, and in the final exam arc, he's left alone to fight a pro hero when his teammate Sero gets knocked out. Only one of them had to make it across, but Mineta chose instead to face the pro head-on, trapping them and carrying Sero's unconscious body along with him across the finish line. Now that's a real man! Behind that pervy facade, he's actually quite smart and resilient with his quirk, leading to some resourceful uses. It doesn't matter if some might call Mineta's dreams stupid, as long as it motivates him, that's all that matters. Yuga Aoyama. Despite constantly speaking about standing out among others, he usually ends up in the background, but he has moments of showing bravery and self-sacrifice, like when he tried to give himself up in the provisional license exam, and really, he only wants to feel like he can stand with the rest of 1A because he feels lesser. Fumikage Tokoyami. He's a bird boy that's kinda edgy and gothic. There isn't much to him, but his ability of controlling a shadow is cool and yeah. Suyu Asui. She's very straight to the point, kind, and doesn't hold back whatever it is she has to say. Her quirk helps her in many different ways, and our 34 artists also quite like her, apparently. Mina Ashido. She's fun, loud, and straightforward. Also, she's kind of friends with Kirishima. I wish it was shown more than just like a single flashback. Beyond this point, I can barely say anything about the rest of the class because they have little to no personality, but you know, here goes. Denki Kaminari. He's Pikachu, and sometimes he's got jokes. Rikido Sato. He likes sweets, and he get buffs sometimes. Koji Koda. I honestly forgot he existed while taking notes. He, controls birds and is kinda shy, I guess. Mezzo Shoji. He's got tentacles. Enough and only thing I could say. Hantasero. He's friends with Mineta, sorta. Also, he's got odd interior decorating skills. Kyoka Jiro. She has a whole opening dedicated to her, but she barely has any personality. Sorry, Jiro fans. You get past the punk rocker aesthetic, she's pretty boring. Ochako Horiko Uraraka. She wants to become a hero to make money for her family. She's nice, but also about as vanilla as you can get. Mashiro Ojiro. You'd have to let me know if he wasn't Hagakure because he does so well disappearing from anything relevant. Finally, Toru Hagakure herself. I'm glad Horikoshi was able to make all these characters with personalities that fit them so well. You know, considering Hagakure's personality is so paper thin that it's see-through. Can I just go on an entire side rant about how much Hagakure makes me angry for, in the end, very trivial reasons? Okay, so first thing, if her entire bit is invisibility, why does she have a costume at all? Wouldn't that only make it harder for her to sneak around and so on? Second, being invisible has almost no combat uses and can really only be used for stealth, and even in that case she can still make sounds, so if she gets caught she's fucking dead. The best she could learn would be martial arts, and I don't know, maybe have an invisible gun or some shit. Doubt it'll be effective against villains like Shigaraki or Stain in the field, but you know, it's something. Third, how'd she get past the entrance exam? I know it's a big meme, but seriously, how did she take down any robots by being invisible? At best, wouldn't she end up in general studies like Shinzo, since her ability is kinda useless for the exam? Fourth, she has no personality. Fifth, we've almost never seen her in any combat setting because she wouldn't be able to do anything, only making it all the harder to like her as a character. Sixth, her entire existence sounds like a living hell because when she was born, it was probably difficult to know. And she must have lived her entire life wondering if people even knew she was even there, because she could never turn off the invisibility. Seventh, and as always test to gauge people's strength and see how strong they are, how is it that Hagakure was able to rank both higher than Mineta and Izuku when she's just a regular ass high school girl? That don't make sense. And finally, eighth, I would say anybody that stands for her also did so for Plank from Eda and Nettie, but Plank has more of a personality as a literal piece of wood with a face on it. Hey man, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. It's just, I'm fine. If you could count, I was only able to give a somewhat thorough description for about 9 or 10 of the 20 students that make up Class 1A, and for about 9 of them I could barely say anything because they were just that underdeveloped or boring, with almost no standout moments to show us who they were as characters. The ones we did know are mostly written pretty decently or well, so it only feels all the more like the series is wasting some serious potential with the roster they've got. In fact, my favorite UA students aren't even in 1A. A character that I heavily enjoyed was Shinzo from General Studies. In the anime, he's only been in the sports festival, but even in that one appearance he made a big impression, and I'm glad they brought him back later on. Shinzo actually has a really good quirk, that being mind control, where he can control someone if he gets them to answer a question he asks. It wasn't applicable in the entrance exam test, however, since that was based around destroying robots. The sports festival was his big chance to shine so that he could face off against other people in an arena for others to watch. And even though he lost in the end, people still took notice. Shinzo also always dealt with the theme of looks and quirk determining if you could be a hero or not. One thing you'll notice with every villain is that they have an appearance and quirk that you'd think could never be that of a hero. Shigaraki decays anything he touches, Stain drinks people's blood to paralyze them, Overhaul breaks down things at a molecular level and he can put them back together, which honestly just sounds like Shigaraki with extra steps, but what do I know? My point is, even if they wanted to be heroes, and it's shown whether canonically or not in MHA Vigilantes that Stain originally tried to be, none of them would truly be accepted by the public because they had villain quirks just like Shinzo, and yet he persists at trying to be a hero because it's what drives him above everything else. I won't get into the manga here as that's not what this video is about, but he does continue to move forward with being a real hero, and it's something I quite enjoy. My other favorite character out of the bunch is my, and hopefully everyone else's boy, Mirio Togeda. Togeda is probably the most relatable character I can identify with in the show. He started off having an incredibly difficult ability that only really could hurt him or make him look dumb, but instead of choosing to give up on his dream for something easier, he adapted. He didn't start off having a great quirk that allowed him to do everything. He had to work for every ounce of worth he contributes to on the battlefield. He uses his quirk in combination with various other skills to fight, and therefore the quirk works as a boost but not as a weight if he loses it. Training under All Might's former sidekick Night-Eye allowed him to be able to predict others' moves and compensate when necessary, showing true wit and speed while fighting. His can-do attitude is also something I found perfect for a hero of his nature that always wants to cheer up those he saves. It's a standard he holds so true to himself that even in the most dire situation, he will try to make the person he's saving smile, and that's no better exemplified than in his fight with Overhaul. Now in this specific arc, the Chi Saikai arc, Izuku and Mirio, along with tons of pro heroes, are trying to infiltrate the base of a Yakuza gang that's using the essence of a girl named Eri to create bullets that stop a person's quirk. The man doing this, Overhaul, has been deconstructing and reconstructing her body at will, breaking her spirit and making her feel responsible responsible if people get hurt trying to save her. Mirio has a personal connection to this, as he and Izuku ran into Eri before the raid without knowing her and let Overhaul get away, so this holds significant value to him. For a good portion of the battle, Mirio is actually doing quite well, keeping Overhaul away from Eri and making it almost impossible for him to land a hit, but one of his disciples arrived during the fight and found a way to get a clean shot at him where he wouldn't permeate. Fire a shot at Eri that would take her quirk away forever. All the work Mirio had put into taking an unusable quirk and making it worthwhile, all he put into being a superhero that could save a million lives, all that training thrown away to let a girl have a chance at hope. He was still the hero he wanted to be though, and even with no powers, when he was beaten down and couldn't use his quirk, he still fought Overhaul for 5 full minutes after. I kinda dislike how Studio Bones portrayed this scene in the anime as it was just sort of a slideshow, and I guess I can get what angle they were going for with it, but the scene just feels cheap and doesn't really get across the time length well. Still, I'd say it was the best fight in the arc even more than Kirishima's short burst with Rappa. Izuku's massive fight with Overhaul was also decent, the animation was great, and seeing Izuku go all out for the first time was pretty sweet, but in terms of pure symbolism, weight, and emotional impact, the other two had much better fights, even if they were both much shorter in length and amounted to certain iconic moments. Before I move on to speaking about the villains, I do want to say that All Might and Aizawa are also quite interesting characters. Seeing All Might knowingly go towards a path that may or may not be the best for his health to keep a symbol for the people was quite noble, and I appreciated that he was still a person with flaws that didn't always make decisions based completely on rationality or what's best logically. That's why I can get past Mirio not being chosen to get one for all. Yeah, Mirio is obviously the better choice, who would probably also be a much better protagonist, but All Might chose Izuku because he saw himself in him. It may not be the best option by any means, but it falls in line with All Might's character, so if in the context of the story, I can at least understand why the decision would make sense. It doesn't mean I don't still believe Mirio would have been a much better lead, but I won't get angry at the decision in the context of the story. Aizawa is basically All Might's antithesis in personality, being more reserved, logical, and willing to get angry at students when they fuck up. I also want to say that Endeavor has one of the best subtle character arcs I've seen in a while. I totally believed his earnest want to get closer with and act like a normal father to his son. Obviously, it was difficult with the whole domestic abuse and emotional scarring thing, but he was able to eventually reach above that hurdle to connect with Todoroki, feeling an obligation to be better as the new symbol of hope for everyone, including his family, even if he feels he doesn't deserve it, leaving his old self behind in the process. With them out of the way, let me tell you about MHA's villain that's disregarding a Mineta by the fans. Fuck you! And oh yeah, the villains are pretty cool also, I guess. Shigaraki, like Endeavor, has a slow but steady transition into a more competent villain over time. At the start, he was quite childish about things not going his way, and relied heavily on All for One to help him out. Over time, though, he got more calculated and less likely to spaz out. When he can have a conversation with Bakugo and not go ballistic, that's around when you can tell he's grown. In the Chiha Saikai arc as well, he planted twice in Toga to intentionally ruin their plans and help the good guys, inadvertently dealing with another problem for the League of Villains, all because Overhaul tried to make them work under him. Shigaraki doesn't even kill Overhaul in the end when he has the chance. He just removes any powers he could use by destroying his arms, making the quirk he needed to fulfill his goal unusable and crushing his spirit. That's the way you want to go about breaking a person. Mwah! He and the rest of the league get more development in the manga after this, but I ain't covering the manga right now, and if you want that video, you better encourage me to make it by subscribing. Moving on, Stain was a character I was slightly disappointed by. I don't mean the character himself was bad at all. He carried a strong conviction in whatever he did, and many of the beliefs he held of what a true hero should be could be seen as actual arguments to tons of people. My issue comes in with how little a part he plays in the story. We're introduced to Stain in episode 24 when he wounds and ultimately permanently cripples Ida's brother, leading to him seeking revenge. By episode 30, Ida, Izuku, and Todoroki have beaten Stain, and he's never seen again. As far as villains for MHA, he's there for one of the shortest time periods before being put out of commission, yet he has such a big impact on the story. He's what encourages many of the new League of Villains members to join. He sends ripples throughout the plot whenever his name is even mentioned. The fear instilled by the first appearance still rings to the characters, but he was given so little time to interact and be given more in-depth interactions. Some could argue he didn't need that amount of time, but considering considering how much people talk about him afterwards, I feel like that conflict in Kamino shouldn't have been the last instance of seeing Stain. He's a good villain, but I think there was so much more that could have been done with him. I don't have much I can say about All For One. He's a perfectly serviceable villain. He's got a pretty cool quirk. There's a great resolution with All Might in there, but yeah, that's about it. I already talked about Overhaul and think he was a pretty decent villain overall, with his ability to get others to join his cause and feel big loyalty to him. I thought the mind games he played with Eri only made it all the more interesting when Izuku and co were able to finally shake it off her, so yeah, overall pretty alright villain. I gotta admit though, my favorite villain in MHA is definitely Gentle Criminal. I was surprised how much I loved him and his chemistry with Labrava, but they are just a great duo that I related to heavily. Gentle is a guy that pulls off tons of different crimes and films them on camera, but he does it all under the guise of being civil in doing so and genuinely believes in his ambition to make his mark with Labrava. The comparability between him and Izuku was something I really craved to see, a person who tried to help but in the end was so inexperienced that not only did they not do so, but they made the situation worse. That action that led to Izuku becoming a hero got Gentle expelled. He tried so many times to get into hero school but failed, and his family shunned him. After long enough, he found that the people he went to school with didn't even know who he was, so he fell into a depressive state thinking he might not ever be remembered, but then he saw a way to make a legacy through acts of villainy that tried to commit it in ways different from others. That passion brought in Labrava, who had been shunned by most people for her obsessiveness, and was able to find a home with Gentle, the only person that truly accepted her. I don't like saying the C word when I don't feel an obligation to, but Labrava is such a cute character with Gentle, and I love every moment of them scheming and shit together. They technically aren't the most serious villains in the entire series by any means, but what they do matters to them, and they share a deep connection. Gentle even lies that he brainwashed Labrava to keep her out of trouble, and act like the fight never happened between him and Izuku that took place afterwards. There are quite a few people who don't like the school festival arc since it feels like such a slowdown from Chia's Saikai, but I feel like it was completely needed for a good break from the super serious action, and it gave us these two, so I like the small arc for that alone. While I'm talking about the arcs of the series, I think I'll just go ahead and rank them based on how good I think each was. Also, I'm not gonna rank any before the sports festival arc, because I feel like that's when the show was still sort of coming into its own. At the bottom, we have the provisional license exam arc. The reason I put this so far down is because it just felt like a time waster. I didn't dislike it at all, but with how it retreads old concepts from other arcs and doesn't really have any big standout moments beyond maybe that one moment with Kaminari, it just doesn't feel worth watching. I also wasn't a big fan of the feud between Todoroki and Inasa. I just found it kind of annoying and didn't think the conflict was all that interesting to watch. Wedged between that and the next ranked arc is the remedial arc. Nothing stand out, but I liked it more than the license exam arc it's connected to, cause at least it was just sorta short and wholesome. Above that, we've got the forest training camp arc. It gave us a bit of much needed development for some of the students in class 1B, and Koda's story with Izuku ended up being cute. This was also the first arc to introduce us to the extended League of Villains, so that was cool, but it just wasn't all that great beyond that. After that is the final exams arc. Though one of the shorter arcs, it still gave plenty of standout moments for Mineta and Bakugo, helping him and Izuku finally start getting through their goddamn issues. Then there's the festival arc, which has my boy Gentle and was something I enjoyed quite a bit. It's integral for action shows and so on to have some moments of downtime between it so the audience can relax, breathe, and just sort of have some fun, and this little arc does that well. After that, I put the hero killer arc since it gave some great character moments for Ida, and Stain was an interesting antagonist that stole the show, but again, slightly short and underused him if you ask me. The pro-hero arc goes next because I feel guilty placing an arc that's 2 episodes any higher than this, but it was a fucking great 2 episodes that really helped Endeavor as a character connect to the viewers. Chiha Saikai comes next, and I put it here because I really love Mirio. Kirishima has some great moments in it, overall himself is a compelling villain, and the fights involving him were mostly top-notch. I enjoyed the part the League of Villains played, and Night Eye had a real connection with All Might and the others that was touching to see. The only complaints I really have are that Mirio's fight with Overhaul was kind of downplayed in the show, and Overhaul's side villains weren't nearly as interesting to me besides maybe Rappa. In second place, I put the somewhat short Hideout Raid arc, and not gonna lie, this arc does sort of have an unfair advantage above others since it's nothing but payoff. It's kinda like Attack on Titan Season 3 Part 2, in that everything that's been building up for a while explodes into this massive, satisfying resolution. All Might fights and finally beats All For One at the cost of his power, the League of Villains base is raided, the Nomus are better explained, Bakugo gets saved. It was all quite nice to see pan out, and finally, to top it off, I've got the one you guys may or may not have been expecting, the UA Sports Festival arc. I don't know just how beloved this arc is, but I loved it back when I watched it, and I still love it now. Tons more characters get time to shine than they normally would. We learn about a character that previously seemed seemed basic. The main character gives up winning in order to help the emotional resolution of someone else, therefore truly showing the theme of self-sacrifice. It even gave us new characters like Mew and Shinzo that were also both fun to watch in very different ways. In all, when I look back on My Hero Academia, I do still see a quite flawed show. Many characters are underdeveloped or have no personalities. Some arcs drag on longer than others or feel somewhat pointless. The main protagonist is kinda just alright most of the time, but the world around it is interesting, the villains are intriguing, the side characters we do get to focus on have tons of personality, the animation and art are beautiful, and the music is quite iconic. Sorry for all the people that were just wanting me to rip MHA a new asshole or whatever. In the end, it's a good show with moments of greatness, but as a whole I don't think it's quite as amazing as some will say it is. Still better than Demon Slayer, though.
Did you just bring out Demon Slayer to inspire Flame Wars in the comments at the end of the video?
Yeah. Alright, peace out, see you in the next one, bye.